Hello. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It is 12:18. I had to go look and see what time it was. It's 12:18. And this would be video number 22 of my Malachi chapter 3 studies. Video number 22. I'm still in verse number 8. Well, I'm officially fully in verse number 8 because I think with video 21, I kind of was looking at verse 7 still going into it, but now I'm officially looking at verse 8 where God said, will a man rob God? But you have robbed me. But you say, in what way have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. Then verse 9 says, you are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation, the whole nation. And so we're going to be digging into that today. And one of the ways we're going to dig into it is to understand the tithes and the offerings in biblical times, what that was in biblical times. Because one of the things that I am finding is that what was done in the Bible, what was done in biblical times, and what's happening today, it's two different things. So in order to understand this and how it applies to us, I have to first look back. And I have to look back at what happened in the Bible time. So I read the verse. I'm going to read it again. Will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. But you say, in what way have we robbed you? And the answer was in tithe and offerings. In tithes and offerings. There was one reference note for this verse. One reference note, and it had to do with the tithes and offerings. Just one reference note, which was in Nehemiah chapter 13. And we're going to look at that. But I do want to say this. Thanks to my Sabbath studies... Thanks to my Sabbath studies yesterday and the day before yesterday, Saturday, because this is Monday. Thanks to my Sabbath studies, I have a second reference when it comes to tithes and offerings, or when it comes to the offerings part of it. And I'm grateful for that, because we know, at the mouth of two or three witnesses, let every matter be firmly established, right? So I'm grateful for that. Also, we have a note to consider from Malachi chapter 3, verse 7 through 10. Let me go over the note first, because knowing me, I will forget it. I wrote it in here, but like with everything that I just studied, I forgot to go back to the note. So I don't want to forget it. So let me read over the note now for this verse. The note is actually for verses 7 through 10. And it kind of picks up with what I was looking at in video 21 about how God said to return to me. So let me read those verses and then we'll do the notes. I'm going to, let's see, it says 10a though. So what's the A part? We'll figure this out. So verse 7, yet from the days of your fathers you have gone away from my ordinances and have not kept them. Return to me and I will return to you, says the Lord of hosts. But you said, in what way shall we return? In other words, how? Like how? Verse 8, will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. But you say, in what way have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. You are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. Verse 10 says, bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. It says 10a. So I'm going to stop there at that part. That there may be food in my house. Of course, verse 10 says more, and we'll definitely be looking at all of that in the next video. But for right now, for what we're looking at now, we're going to stop there. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Verse 10. Here's what the note says. The final climatic address begins with a command to return to Yahweh. Yahweh is Hebrew for Jehovah. And it ends with a command to remember his instructions. Evidence of the people's return to God would be to resume bringing tithes and other offerings to support the priests. Ooh, key word. I like how it says other offerings. And I like how it says that, because what you'll see when we get to the end of this, it just fit right in with what I last looked at and last considered in my notes. Thank you, Lord. Like, it's just like confirmation. Just got the answer to, yeah. So I'm going to read that again. Evidence of the people's return to God will be to resume bringing tithes and other offerings to support the priests, Levites, and landless poor. To support the priests, Levites, and landless poor. And then it has some scriptures there which I did not look, well, two of them I actually did look at. Two of these scriptures that are listed in the notes I actually did look at. I didn't look at all of them, maybe with the next video, but definitely not going to do it now. Because it'll just push this video. I already know my videos be long, so like I be trying, y'all. I really do. It says such offerings would demonstrate a proper attitude toward the possessions as God's gift. I'm going to read that again. Such offerings would demonstrate a proper attitude toward their possessions as God's gift. In other words, our attitude towards what we have, and how we look at it. Like, are we looking at this stuff as being ours, or are we looking at it as being a gift from God, or belonging to God, like, which it actually does? Like, how are we viewing what we have? That's good. That kind of falls in line with what I was looking at last too. So, getting to my notes. Beginning with the reference provided. The reference provided here in verse 8 was Nehemiah chapter 13. So I'm going to go over there. Nehemiah is found at around the beginning of the book. It is after Ezra, which comes after Chronicles. I think it's a book before Ezra. I think it's like, what's before Ezra? Ruth? Nope. Ezra comes directly after Chronicles. Yep. So directly after Chronicles is a book called Ezra. We know Chronicles, right? It comes after Kings, which comes after Samuel. We know, right? So Ezra, actually, let me share this little tidbit too. Back in the day, the original manuscripts combined the books of Ezra and Nehemiah into one book. Just so you know. Just so you know, the original manuscripts combined the two. Oh, and this is what I was looking for too. This, I just seen a map. Well, you could see it, you can't see it, but you could see it. I saw this map here is a map of Jerusalem in Nehemiah's day, and it shows the various gates. Right? I need to write this down. I'm gonna write this at the top of the page so that I could come back to it. And you'll see why in a second. Nehemiah 3. I'm going to put 3:3 for map. When it was talking about the choirs and like where they started and how one went to the north, I think, and one went to the south. The choirs were split in two, and they went to the north and the south, and like the direction they took, and it shows all that here. Woo! I'm gonna make sure to take a picture of this too, so that you can see it when it's time. I'm not gonna worry about that now. I just stumbled across that. So yeah, thank you again. Thank you, Lord, again. All right, so Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 10 through 12 is where the note from Malachi took me. I'm gonna put a marker in that for Malachi. So we're over in Nehemiah, and what we're going to be looking at here in Nehemiah, just to kind of give you an overview, what we're going to be looking at, this that we'll be reading, is taking place after the Israelites, the Jews, who were exiled to Babylon, back in the days of Nebuchadnezzar. Then, later on, Nebuchadnezzar was overthrown by the Medo-Persians, by Cyrus and then Darius. And so during that time of Medo-Persia's rule, Cyrus and then later Darius made it possible for the exiles to return to Jerusalem and rebuild. And that rebuild happened in like 3 stages. So the first stage, the return would have been with Zerubbabel. And that return would have been to rebuild the actual temple. And there was some hiccups in the project, people like trying to stand against it to keep from happening. And you would have saw that in the book of Ezra, like the first 6 chapters of Ezra, you would have saw that. But even though there was some hiccups when they returned in 538 BCE, they was able to restart the project. How many years later? 18 years later, in 520 BCE, and complete the project 4 years later in 516 BCE. Then you had your second stage, which is where Ezra and the group of exiles that came back with him, they came back and they were funding everything. He came back with the funding, which came from the government. We'll be looking more into that. They were told to bring from the temple, from the royal treasury. In other words, from the government, from the royal treasury, not from the people. Keep this in mind. The fund to rebuild the place of worship, rebuild the temple, came from the royal treasury and not from the people. And they brought back, of course, all of the gold and the silver articles that Nebuchadnezzar had taken. You will see all of that in chapters 7 through 10 of Ezra. Then you have stage 3, which is where we are. And at stage 3, you have Nehemiah. And Nehemiah is coming back now, and the temple is built, but he's coming back, and his focus is to now rebuild all the walls. And so that project to rebuild the walls actually took 52 days. So it wasn't long at all. And you'll see all of that in the first 13 chapters. Is it any more chapters? It's only 13. So in the 13 chapters of Nehemiah, you will see that. So the first thing first, before we even look at these particular verses, which would be verses 10 through 14 or 10 through 13 of Nehemiah chapter 13, before we look at that verse, I felt going over it Like, for me, it makes sense. I understand it. But to make it make sense, I felt that it would be good that we understand the actual situation. Now, we know they was destroyed. We know that the temple was destroyed, and, they was over there for a while in Babylon, and they're coming back. And so in the coming back, the first thing first is that Jerusalem has to be repopulated. To give you an idea, okay, so I don't know what city you're in, that you're watching from, or what state, but Chicago, I'm going to use Chicago as an example. Chicago is a pretty well-known city. We know that it is one of the major cities of Illinois, the state of Illinois, right? Major city is not the capital, but it is a major city. So Jerusalem is a major city in the territory of Judah. Well, it kind of is. I have to think about that, because of the fact that when God chose Jerusalem, it was chose because it was not owned by any of the tribes. Like the tribes, when they were going to choose their land and stuff, nobody chose Jerusalem. Nobody claimed that territory. So it was central to all of the nations of these 12 tribes of Israel, right? So the fact that nobody really chose it, it kind of puts me in mind of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C., where the Capitol building is. It puts me in mind of that location because of the fact that it's like the hub. It is where government is ran for the rest of the 50 states. Y'all do know that Washington, D.C. is not a state, right? That part, Washington, D.C. is not a state, but it's the government, it's where the government is situated that runs everything for the 50 United States. That's kind of, I should have dug into that to bring that out more, or to bring that point out more about Jerusalem. I just kind of wanted to give you an idea about Jerusalem, or help you to get a mental picture. I'm the type of person that what helps me to understand things is when I can visualize it. It just makes it easier for me to grasp what it is that I'm reading about or looking at. So anyway, Jerusalem has to be repopulated, and you see the repopulation of Jerusalem in Nehemiah chapter 11. So I'm going to turn over a couple of chapters, because we're going to look at that. We're going to look at Nehemiah chapter 11, chapter 12, and then we're going to hit that nugget in Nehemiah chapter 13 that ties us to Malachi chapter 3 verse 8. So this is what my note says. With the repopulating of Jerusalem, as the exiles returned, the temple personnel was reinstalled. The temple personnel, in other words, the people that worked there, that had their jobs there, the temple personnel was reinstalled. During and after the exile. Now, this was something that I took note of, that I found was really, really, really interesting. During and after the exile, during and after the exile, they kept a record of the priests and the Levites. And you'll see this record in Nehemiah chapter 12, verses, now why did I put 27 through 47? Verse 1 through 26. Okay, because I'm like, wait a minute, why did I put that? Because that's not there. But you actually see the record of the priests in the priests and the Levites who returned in verses 1 through 26 of chapter 12 of Nehemiah. But what I want to do now, I wonder if that's going to take me back. Let me see real quick. Well, yeah, my notes is going to take me back. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do this. So I want to share with you first Nehemiah chapter 12, verse 27 through 47. This is what it says. Now at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem. Now remember, they finished, right? It took them 50, what days? How many days? I say 52 days. It took them 52 days to finish the rebuilding of this wall under the guidance and direction of Nehemiah as governor. And so it says, now at the dedication of the wall at Jerusalem, they sought out the Levites in all their places. The Levites weren't in Jerusalem. They were supposed to be, but they were not in Jerusalem. They were living in, they were scattered in different places around Jerusalem. And it says, they sought out the Levites in all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to celebrate the dedication with gladness, both with thanksgiving and singing with cymbals and stringed instruments and harps. And the sons of the singers gathered together from the countryside around Jerusalem, from the villages of the Netophathites, from the house of Gilgal, from the fields of Geba and Asmaveth, for the singers had built themselves villages all around Jerusalem. Let me show this to you. Let's see. Let me show this to you. So y'all, when I study, I kind of like I said, I'm a visual learner. And I like to understand what it is that I'm looking at. Like, make sure that I'm really getting it. I like to see. And so I pulled out this Moody Atlas of the Bible and Land. It's like a book of maps. And so I pulled it out. And in pulling it out, I found... So let me turn this way. I'm about to get my phone because I'm videotaping from the phone, and I'm about to show you all of this and might point some of this stuff out to you. So let's do that now. Alrighty, so this is Jerusalem right here, and they had to repopulate this area. But until they did that, they were moving in, or the exiles that was returning from Assyria, Babylon, in that area, as they were coming back, they were settling in cities around. So as you see, I have some of these cities highlighted in yellow, and then I have some highlighted in pink. And then here's more on this side that's in yellow. This side would be like down here, right down here. So there's Beersheba right there, and some more. And you see these listed. There's some cities that were listed that I could not find on the map. There was some that had different names. Like, for instance, Hebron. They called Hebron Kirjath Arba. So some of the cities had different names. Of course, the scriptures let us know that that's Hebron, Kirjath Arba. So all of these that's in the yellow, highlighted in the yellow, these were cities that the Levites, the children of Judah, came and stayed in. And highlighted in the pink would be the cities that the children of Benjamin came and stayed in. And remember, Judah, the tribe of Judah was made up of, or the nation of Judah was made up of two tribes, which was Judah and Benjamin. And then the nation of Israel was made up of the 10 tribes. So here we're looking at the nation of Judah, the two-tribe nation, the Benjamites. These are the areas that they inhabited. And the Jews, this is the area that they inhabit, including one on this side. So I wanted to make sure to point that out to you so that you could see. Like, I think these maps be real helpful. And then there's Jerusalem right there. All right, let's get back to the study. Okay, so let's finish with the reading of Nehemiah chapter 12, verses 27 through 47. I'll just start again since I paused to show you guys these areas on the map. So it says, now at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought out the Levites in all their places to bring them to Jerusalem, to celebrate the dedication with gladness, both with thanksgiving and singing, with cymbals and stringed instruments and harps. And the sons of the singers gathered together from the countryside of Jerusalem, from the villages of the Netophathites, from the house of Gilgal, from the fields of Geba and Asmaveth, for the singers had built themselves villages all around Jerusalem. Then the priests and Levites purified themselves, purified the people and the gates and the wall. That is important. That stands out to me and is important to me because that was one of the things that God had told his people to do in my Sabbath studies that I was looking at in Exodus chapter 19. They were supposed to purify themselves, sanctify themselves, consecrate themselves in preparation of going before the Lord, or in preparation of meeting with the Lord. So here, continuing, it says, verse 30, then the priests and Levites purified themselves, purified the people and the gates and the wall. It says, so I brought the leaders of Judah up on the wall and appointed 2 large thanksgiving choirs. One went to the right on the wall toward the refuse gate. After them, it says, went Hoshaiah and half of the leaders of Judah, and Azariah, Ezra, Meshullam, Judah, Benjamin, Shemaiah, Jeremiah, and some of the priest's sons with trumpets. Zechariah, the son of Jonathan, the son of Shemaiah, the son of Mattaniah, the son of Micaiah, the son of Zakur, the son of Asaph, and his brethren, Shemaiah, Azarel, Milaleh, Gilaleh, Ma'ai, Nathanael, Judah, and Hanani. It says, with the musical instruments of David, the man of God. And Ezra the scribe went before them. By the fountain gate in front of them, they went up the stairs of the city of David, on the stairway of the wall, beyond the house of David, as far as the water gate eastward. Y'all, I want to see this. So, hold on. Let's grab a picture. Let me see if I could take a picture of it and stick it up here. That way you can see what I'm going to do with that picture. Those who went to the north, who went to the right, that would have been north. Those who went to the right, I'm going to highlight their area in yellow. And those who went to the left, let's see, it says this other Thanksgiving choir. Let me read that. Verse 38. The other Thanksgiving choir went the opposite way and was behind them with half of the people on the wall, going past the tower of the ovens as far as the broad wall, and above the gate of Ephraim, above the old gate, above the fish gate, the tower of Hananel, the tower of the 100, as far as the sheep gate, and they stopped by the gate of the prison. So the 2 Thanksgiving choirs stood in the house of God. Likewise, I and half of the rulers with me, and the priests, Eliakim, Masaiah, Benjamin, Micaiah, Elione, that name I can't pronounce. Elioane, that one I don't know. Zechariah and Hananiah with trumpets, and Maaseiah, Shemaiah, Eleazar, Uzi, Jehohanan, Malchijah, Elam, and Ezer. The singers sang loudly with Jezreiah the director. Also that day they offered great sacrifices and rejoiced, for God had made them rejoice with great joy. The women and the children also rejoiced, so that the joy of Jerusalem was heard afar off. It says, let me pause there before I get into the temple responsibilities. Let me pause there, and I want to make sure again that you're able to see this map that I found of the wall that they would have gone on. One would have went the one way and the other would have went the other way, but they would have met up at the temple. So let's go get that. Okay, so I want to show you this again. This is the group that went to the right, and this is the group that went in the opposite direction. So the group that went to the right, marked in the yellow, let me go back to chapter 12 of Nehemiah. It says, one went to the right. This is verse number 31 of Nehemiah chapter 12. It says, one went to the right on the wall toward the refuse gate. Now here's the refuse gate right here. So one group went on the right on the wall towards the refuse gate. Now what I couldn't figure out is if they started here at this gate here is that the fountain gate? 13, yeah, this is the fountain gate right here. So I couldn't figure out if they started here at the fountain gate or if they started here at the dung gate. But the route that they were traveling, like they were going that way. And the same with this group here. So I'm kind of thinking that they started at the dung gate. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I'm like looking at these verses. It would be Nehemiah chapter 12, verse 31 through verse number I would say verse number 40, verse 31 through, verse 40. So anyway, this first group, they went to the right. That would be that way. This is the right. And it says, they went to the right on the wall toward the refuse gate. So they could have like started at the King's Garden over here. But it was actually, Anyway, toward the refuse gate, it says, then it mentioned who it was, like Hoshea and Meshulam, and I'm not going to say everybody's names, but it says in verse number 37, it says, by the fountain gate, which is right here, by the fountain gate, in front of them, they went up. So they could have been down here walking too. They could have been on the ground walking, toward the refuse gate, and then come around here, like walking along the outside of it, and then coming around here, which means they could have started over here. Look, what is verse 16? The pool of Siloam. Let's see. 16, 17 is out there. So they could have started like somewhere up in here also. They could have started somewhere up in here, and they could have walked on the outside toward this refuse gate, came around, and then here, like, see how this road here comes around? There's this road right here. So they could have did that, came around. Oops, look at me. I'm trying to, I am not good at holding the phone sometimes. I am sorry. Okay, so they could have started over here somewhere and then came around on this road here, which it said, it literally did say toward the refuse gate, toward the refuse gate. So they could have came around, going toward this refuse gate, came on past it, And then right here, cut inside right there and went to the fountain gate. And I say that because at verse 37, it says, by the fountain gate in front of them, it says, what do it say? They went up the stairs of the city of David. So they went up the stairs, which would have been like right up in there. They went up the stairs of the city of David on the stairway of the wall beyond the house of David as far as the water gate. So now they're on the gate. They're actually on the gate now. And they're walking this gate towards this gate here, which would be the water gate. I think number 9 is, this is the water gate right here. So they could have been on the road out here, walking around it. This is the refuse gate, coming around there, coming up this way, coming up the stairs and going onto the gate and then walking. And that would have made sense even if they start, question would have been, where would they started at? They could have started at, I don't know where they would have started at. But anyway, so they're on the gate now and they're here at this gate, which is the water gate. And then they keep going. This is the horse gate. This one is Mifkad gate. There are other names. I actually did a study with these gates, and I will have to go back and find that study because there was something significant about each of these gates. And so it says they're walking eastward. Anyway, this is that group. And so then you had a second group, the other group, who went the opposite way. And instead of them going this way, also they went the opposite way. And so where did I have them starting at? It says here, I was behind them with half the people on the wall going past the Tower of the Ovens. So where would the Tower of the Ovens have been? That part. This here, well, that's in here. That's the Pool of Siloam. That's the King's Garden, this area here. And right there is the Pool of Siloam. 12. Where's 12 at? Where is 12? That's right there. So that's on this side over here. That's the Valley Gate right there. And does it mention the Valley Gate? It says going past the Tower of the Ovens. I will probably need to look that up to see what that is. It says as far as the broad wall. I don't know what the broad wall is unless it would be like up in here. I just don't know what the broad wall is. That one looks like it's kind of broad too, like as opposed to, like, you can see like the sizes of these gates. Anyway, it says, and above the gate of Ephraim. So that part. So the gate of Ephraim is this gate here. This is the gate of Oh, I found it. I figured it out. Okay, so the Tower of the Ovens is this here. That's that tower right there. That's called the Tower of the Furnaces, but here it calls it the Tower of the Ovens. So it says going past the Tower of the Ovens. So they're I'm thinking that they again started here at this Valley Gate, but they went past the Tower of the Ovens, which is right there, and then they went it says above. No, it says as far as the broad wall. So I guess that would have been the broad wall. So, and then it says above the gate of Ephraim, that's right there. Above the old gate, that's right there. The old gate would have been right there. It says above the fish gate. The fish gate is right there. Where that little 22 is. It says the Tower of Hananel. So the Tower of Hananel, that would have been, you see where that number 2 is right there? That's the Tower of Hananel. that number 2 right there is the Tower of Hananel. Then it says the Tower of the Hundreds. The Tower of the Hundreds is it's either number 3 or number 4. The Tower of Mia, I'm thinking is right there. The Tower of the Hundreds. It says, then it says, as far as the sheep gate, that's here. So I'm thinking that is the tower. Number 3 right there is the Tower of the Hundreds. Right where it says number 4, that is the sheep gate. So this one was easier to figure out, you guys. It says, and they stopped by the gate of the prison. The gate of the prison would have been right there, number 5. So you had this group coming here this way. Gate 7 being the McFod gates. So this group is coming this way, and this other group was coming that way. And that's what you're seeing here. And they met up at the temple, which is that building right there. This is the temple right here. And so that's where they met up. All right, I wanted to show y'all that. All right. Okay, I wanted to make sure y'all saw that. So, the temple responsibilities, verses 44 through 47. And again, we're in Nehemiah chapter 12. It says, at the same time, some were appointed over the rooms of the storehouse for the offerings, the first fruit, and the tithes, to gather into them from the fields of the cities the portions specified by the law for the priests and Levites. For Judah rejoiced over the priests and Levites. Now the priests, your preachers, the Levites, your singers, just to give you an idea who ministered. It says both the singers and the gatekeepers kept the charge of their God and the charge of the purification according to the command of David and Solomon his son. It says, for in the days of David and Asaph of old, there were chiefs of the singers and songs of praise and thanksgiving to God. In the days of Zerubbabel, in the days of Nehemiah, all Israel gave the portions for the singers and the gatekeepers, a portion for each day. They also consecrated holy things for the Levites, and the Levites consecrated them for the children of Aaron. But what caught me was the fact that in verse number 47, it says they gave portions for the singers. So my question is, portions for the singers, what was this? What was the portions for the singers? And that ended up taking me back to Nehemiah. That ended up taking me back to Nehemiah chapter 11. I had to back up a little bit, especially in reference to these people who dwelled in Jerusalem. So let's look at that now. We're backing up another chapter. So in verse 11, in chapter 11, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of skip through it. And the reason I'm going to skip through it is a lot of names, y'all. It's a lot of names. So, in reference to Jerusalem, remember, the first thing was to refill it, to get inhabitants, people living there again. So the leaders of the people, they dwelt at Jerusalem. And then for the rest of the people that was going to live there, what they did was they cast lots. And according to the reference notes, they cast lots because living there was really going to be a hardship. Let's see. This is what the notes say. It says Jerusalem was underpopulated and consisted largely of the leaders of the people. It says the solution to the problem was to have 1/10 of the population come to dwell in Jerusalem, chosen by casting lots. While this was a burden for those selected, This would not have been the selection of individuals, but of families. It is not clear whether the men who willingly offered themselves were in addition to those chosen by lots. So again, it says here, Nehemiah chapter 11, starting at verse 1. Now the leaders of the people dwelt at Jerusalem. The rest of the people cast lots to bring one out of 10 to dwell in Jerusalem, the holy city, and 9/10 were to dwell in other cities. And so I showed you guys that when I showed you the map in this Moody Bible Atlas. Then there was some who willingly offered themselves to dwell at Jerusalem. Again, it was going to be a hardship because, everything, they had to rebuild everything. So starting from scratch. It's like, to give you an idea, think of an area that has been destroyed by a tornado or a hurricane. For us out here, it would have been a hurricane. So think of a hurricane coming through, and it just, to give you, okay, so Panama City here in Florida, there's a city called Panama City. And a few years back, we had this hurricane. I think it was Hurricane Sally. No, it wasn't that one. It was the one before Hurricane Sally. I can't remember the name of it. But that hurricane, it was supposed to hit here, and it didn't. And it bypassed us, and it hit. One of the areas that it hit really bad was Panama City. And the cities leading up to that in Panama City. So anyway, some time afterward, my husband and we took this trip. We had to go somewhere. I don't remember exactly where, but everywhere we go, we drive. And so as we were driving past this area, we saw how tore up. Oh, no, it wasn't. We had to go into Panama City because there was a young man, one of my husband's clients, who was doing a CD release. So we're driving, we get into Panama City, and we literally saw just how bad this city was tore up. I would tell you to go online and Google, Panama City, after the hurricane or however, or you don't even have to do that. This is just an example, so you can think of different natural disasters. I'm going to say a natural disaster that your area might experience. It could have been a tornado, because them tornadoes be doing damage too. Late last night, early this morning, we were under tornado watch. I mean, literally, the alarms and everything was going off. So I was up. I was up. But what I'm saying is the damage that is done, and then after all that damage is done, there's a rebuilding that has to take place. So they were bringing in people to live, because they had to inhabit the city and live in it and begin to rebuild. And that's why I was saying that it would have been a hardship for some, but then there was some who willingly offered themselves. It says here, verse 3, it says, but in the cities of Judah, everyone dwelt in his own possession. So let me say, verse 3 starts off by saying, these are the heads of the province who dwelt in Jerusalem. And then in parentheses, it says, in the cities of Judah, everyone dwelt in his own possession in their cities. Israelites, priests, Levites, Nethinim, the descendants of Solomon's servants. Also in Jerusalem dwelt some of the children of Judah and of the children of Benjamin. And then it goes on to list. So it was for those who dwelt in the city, who were of the priests, was 3 priests, just because got the numbers here. So it was 3 priests. And then those who worked with the priests, your Levites, your gatekeepers, turned out to be 822. And then there was the overseer of the Levites, who was Uzi. of the sons of Asaph, singers in charge of the service of God, plus him, the total would have been 826 that was actually in Jerusalem at the temple. It says here, verse 23, for it was the king's command concerning them, talking about the singers, that a certain portion should be for the singers, a quota day by day. So the reason why I read that, and like I said, I had to skip through because it's mostly names. It literally is identifying who was in Jerusalem, who actually stayed there in Jerusalem, of the priesthood, of the Levites, and of the singers and the gatekeepers, the workers who was there. And it identified them. But then again, verse 23, which was a very key verse that talked about the king's command concerning them, that a certain portion should be for the singers. Now this certain portion, remember, we're talking about tithes and offerings. That's Malachi chapter 3 verse 8, right? God was telling the people, you're robbing me of the tithes and the offerings. And then we got sent over to Nehemiah chapter 13. But before I could get good into Nehemiah chapter 13, I needed to kind of go back. So then we're looking at Nehemiah chapter 12, where they've got the temple built, they got the wall built. And but I couldn't, there was a certain part that, did I read the part about the temple responsibilities, those who worked at the temple, which we saw it was 826 per Nehemiah chapter 11, 826, but we saw what their responsibilities were. And it mentioned in verse number of Nehemiah chapter 12, verse number 47, it says, in the days of Zerubbabel, in the days of Nehemiah, and in the days of Nehemiah. Now Zerubbabel, he would have been the first one to come back, the first governor to come back. And he was the one that was instrumental in the building of the temple itself. And then Zerubbabel was I'm getting this backwards. Zerubbabel was the one that was interested in the rebuilding of the temple. He was the one that was instrumental. Not interested in, but instrumental in the rebuilding of the temple. And Nehemiah was instrumental in the rebuilding of the walls. And then it says, and in the days of Zerubbabel and in the days of Nehemiah, all Israel gave portions for the singers. Gave portions for the singers and the gatekeepers, a portion for each day. That is what sent me over to chapter 11, where you're looking at these ones who came back. You see how many it was. And then here it is again in verse, let me read verse 22 and 23. It says, also the overseer of the Levites at Jerusalem was Uzi, the son of Abani, the son of Hashabiah, the son of Mattaniah, the son of Micah, the sons of Asaph, the singers in charge of the service of the house of God, for it was the king's command concerning them, concerning the singers, y'all, concerning the singers, that a certain portion should be for the singers, a quota. Okay, so a portion of what? Like a portion of what? That's where we get taken to Ezra. So we're going to flip over. Now, remember I told you, I started off at the beginning by saying that Ezra and Nehemiah actually, long time ago, used to be one book. They ended up separating the two books, but it used to be one book. So this is Ezra. This is chapter 6. I'm going to read verse 8, 9, and 10. And the reason I'm going to read verse 8, 9, and 10 of Ezra chapter 6 is because this decree by the king, you're going to see this decree here. It was King Darius, King Darius. Ezra chapter 6 verse 1 starts off by saying, then King Darius. Why am I calling him Darius? I'm sorry. Then King Darius issued a decree. And then I'm going to skip over to this decree. So it says, this is verse 8, 9, and 10 of Ezra chapter 6. It says, moreover, I issue a decree as to what you should do for the elders of these Jews for the building of this house of God. Let the cost be paid at the king's expense. The cost is coming from the government. It says that the cost be paid at the king's expense from taxes on the region beyond the river. I went to go look that up, y'all, because I wanted to know, what is the region beyond the river? What is the river? So the river was the Euphrates River, and that was from the point of view of Mesopotamia and Persia, like up in that area. From their point of view, the Euphrates River. And the region would be modern day Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, encompassing all of Judah. It would have been that area. So they had to pay taxes, right, to the government once a year, a yearly tax. Listen, it's no different from how the IRS takes a yearly tax that has to be paid. You got to fill out these forms and everything. It's no different from that. So it says, let the cost be paid at the king's expense from taxes on the region beyond the river. This is to be given immediately to these men so that they are not hindered. To what men? To Ezra and them who are rebuilding and working at the temple. It says it's to immediately, the taxes that was being taken from the people in those regions was to immediately, per the king's expense, was not given to the king. It was not given to the government, even though the government was exacting this tax. It was given to Jerusalem. It was sent to Jerusalem. It says, so that they are not hindered. And whatever they need, young bulls. So in addition to these taxes, whatever they need, young bulls, rams, lambs for the burnt offerings of the God of heaven, wheat, salt, wine, and oil, according to the requests of the priests who are in Jerusalem. The government was making sure that the priests had everything that they needed. The taxes that was being taxed on this region was initially supposed to go to the governor, to the government, to the king over this government, was being sent to the priests. It says, let it be given to them, according to the request of the priests who are in Jerusalem, let it be given to them day by day without fail. Day by day without fail, that they may offer sacrifices of sweet aroma to the God of heaven and pray for the life of the kings and his sons. This is what the note says. Darius's decree not only provided funds for reconstruction, but for the daily sacrificial offerings as well. His motivation was not wholly altruistic, but that the people would pray for the king and his sons. While Darius was a devotee of Ahura Mazda, he was willing to take spiritual support from any support. Anyway, in other words, they were real superstitious. So he was known for letting people go back to their lands and worship, and then having them pray for him. Like he was real superstitious. So this part again, the monies, the taxes was coming from the government to fund the rebuilding, as well as to fund the sacrifices, as well as anything else that the priests felt that they needed to do their job. And he said, this was the decree of the king, do not hinder them. Let them not be hindered. Another reference that I was given was in Ezra chapter 7. So we're going to go over there now. At this point, this is Artaxerxes. This is another king. He's king of Persia after Darius. And so this is what Artaxerxes writes to Ezra. This is a letter. He says, I issue a decree that all those of the people of Israel and the priests and Levites in my realm who volunteer to go to Jerusalem may go with you. He's telling this to Ezra. Whoever wants to go, of the people of Israel, of the priests, and of the Levites, you can leave here. You can now leave and go back to Jerusalem. It says, and whereas you are being sent, remember this is a decree, so it has the legal language, right? It says, and whereas you are being sent by the king and his 7 counselors to inquire concerning Judah and Jerusalem with regard to the law of your God, which is in your hand. And whereas you are to carry the silver and gold, which the king and his counselors have freely offered to the God of Israel. This is, well, let me just keep going. Let me not interject here. Let me keep going. It says, verse 16, and whereas all the silver and gold that you may find in all the province of, look, he says, whatever you find of silver and gold, whatever you find in all the province of Babylon, he says, along with the free will offering of the people and the priests, are to be freely offered for the house of their God in Jerusalem. In other words, all the silver and gold, freely give it to them. Like whatever they find, give it. It says, now therefore, be careful to buy with this money bulls, rams, lambs with their grain offerings and their drink offerings, and offer them on the altar of the house of your God in Jerusalem. In other words, be accountable now. This money, because you're getting a huge sum of money. Listen, y'all, I went to go find that out too. How much money did they actually get? How much taxes was they were getting? Let's see, how do I want to say it? The amount of taxes that King Darius and King Artaxerxes was exacting from this territory was 7,740 Babylonian talents a year. 1 talent equals 30.13 kilograms. So in order to find out how much that is, you multiply 7,740 by 30.13 kilograms, and what you come up with is 233,182.2 kilograms. Now, you take that amount, and this is a year, each year. So you take that amount, and to make it make sense for us today who use dollars and cents, you would multiply that amount by the weight of silver today. We don't know by the amount of silver today. We don't know what the amount of silver would have been back then. No, we just don't know. But calculating it for today, silver at today's price is $1,531.66 a kilogram, right? So you multiply the 233,182.2 kilograms by this $1,531.66, and basically, for us to understand and for us to comprehend what was going on, Darius was collecting $1.17 billion a year. If they were doing that, if they were still active today, and they were doing that at the prices that we have today, he was getting $1.17 billion a year. That's a lot. And then he was taking this money that he was collecting as tax from these other areas and giving it to Jerusalem, to the priests, for the rebuild, upkeep, and the provisions for Jerusalem. It said here, we're going to look at this again. He says here, I issue a decree that all those of the people of Israel and the priests and the Levites in my realm who volunteer to go up to Jerusalem, you may go with you. And whereas you are being sent by the king and his 7 counselors to inquire concerning Judah and Jerusalem with regard to the law of your God, which is in your hand, whereas you are to carry the silver and gold, which the king and his counselors have freely offered to the God of Israel, whose dwelling is in Jerusalem. Now that they were clear on that. They were clear that the God of Israel, that his dwelling, the creator of everything, his dwelling was in Jerusalem. They were clear on that. It says, whereas all the silver and gold that you may find in all the province of Babylon, along with the free will offering of the people and the priests, are to be freely offered to the house of their God in Jerusalem. They was given 1.17 billion in today's terminology, like what we would understand, because y'all talents don't mean nothing to me. I mean, it doesn't mean nothing to me. It's just a coin, like that. That has no nothing. But when you start talking dollars and cents, baby, that's a lot. That's a lot. It says, now therefore, be careful to buy with this money bulls, rams, lambs, with their grain offerings and their drink offerings, and offer them at the altar of the house of your God in Jerusalem. So he was telling them, be accountable. Be accountable. But that's not all. He says, and whatever seems good to you and your brethren to do with the rest of the silver and gold, because there was going to be some that was left over. 1.17 billion, right? He says, whatever seems good to you and your brethren to do with the rest of the gold and silver, do it according to the will of your God. Again, there was an accountability, but he wasn't making them accountable to him. Artaxerxes was not making them accountable to him. He was making them accountable to the Lord their God. It says also, the articles that are given to you for the service of the house of your God, deliver in full before the God of Jerusalem. Just read that again. Also, the articles that are given to you for the service of the house of your God, deliver in full before the God of Jerusalem. Listen, don't be trying to take some and put it to the side. Don't be trying to cuff a little bit, and for yourself. He said, deliver this stuff in full before the God of Jerusalem. Again, that accountability. There was a huge accountability. It says, and whatever more outside of 1.17 billion, you mean to tell me you can't manage that and make sure you have everything that you need, and everybody else that you're accountable for have everything you can. He says, and whatever more may be needed for the house of your God, which you may have occasion to provide, pay for it from the king's treasury. In other words, the government is paying for this, y'all. The government is paying for this. Let me keep reading. Because I'm supposed to read down to verse 26. So verse 21 says, and even I, Artaxerxes the king, issue a decree to all the treasurers who are in the region beyond the river. So now not only did he tell this to Ezra and give his decree to Ezra, but now he's issuing a decree to all these different treasurers in these different regions that has to pay these taxes. This is what he says. And even I, Artaxerxes the king, issue a decree to all the treasurers who are in the region beyond the river, that whatever Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of God of the God of heaven, may require of you, let it diligently be done, up to 100 talents of silver, 100 cores of wheat, 100 baths of wine, 100 baths of oil, and salt without prescribed limit. Whatever is commanded by the God of heaven, let it diligently be done for the house of the God of heaven. For why should there be wrath against the realm of the king and his sons? Also, in addition to that, we inform you that it shall not be lawful to impose tax, tribute, or custom on any of the priests, Levites, singers, gatekeepers, Nethinim, or servants of this house of God. He's letting them know don't you charge them any tax either. Y'all, did y'all know these churches had this, it's called 501c3, where they don't have to pay taxes for anything. They could go in and buy whatever they need without tax. It's right here. That's why it is so important to read this stuff in this Old Testament. Because what you will find is that a lot of your church practices today are rooted in this, what you see here in God's word. A lot of it is rooted there. As a matter of fact, your Christian church is an offshoot of Judaism. Whether, I don't know that you know it, but there was Jewish Christians first. So it's important to see this stuff and to understand this stuff, because like right here, it was Artaxerxes who made it a decree and informed all these other areas that was paying these taxes. He said, we inform you that it shall not be lawful to impose tax, tribute, or custom on any of the priests, the Levites, the singers, y'all. The singers, it says, or any of the gatekeepers, the Nethinim, or servants of the house of God, And you, Ezra, according to your God-given wisdom, set magistrates and judges who may judge all the people who are in the region beyond the river. They set up judges, but check this out. It says, all such as know the laws of your God. These judges needed to know and judge according to the laws of God. It says, and teach those who do not know them. Whoever will not observe the law of your God and the law of the king, let judgment be executed speedily on him, whether it be death or banishment or confiscation of goods or imprisonment. I'm going to read that again, verse number 25. And you, Ezra, according to your God-given wisdom, set magistrates and judges who may judge all the people who are in the region beyond the river, all such as know the laws of your God. And teach those who do not know them. Whoever will not observe the law of your God, the law and the law of the king, let judgment be executed speedily on him, whether it be death, banishment, confiscation of goods, or imprisonment. I ask, as I've always asked, when you walk around and you hear people say, we're not under law, we're under grace, what law is you not under? What law are you not under? That phrase, that statement is a misrepresentation of the actual scripture found in Romans chapter 6, verse 14, which says, sin no longer has dominion over me. Sin no longer has dominion over me. Sin. So the law that you would not be under is the law of sin. And if you keep reading, you'll find out in Romans that there are two laws. There's the law of sin and there's the law of God. But by your just saying, I'm not under law, I'm under grace, what you're saying is no different from when Eve said, we can eat of all the trees in the garden, but the tree that is in the middle of the garden, we can't eat of that tree, because in the day we eat of that tree, we'll actually die, when there was two trees in the middle of the garden. So she didn't identify which tree. And in her not identifying which tree was in the middle of the garden, she got confused and tripped up and ended up eating from the tree she was not supposed to eat from. The tree that she could have ate from and would not have died from, and the same tree of which we will get the opportunity to eat from, is the tree of life. That tree was also in the middle of the garden. If she would have said, if she would have said, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that's the tree we cannot eat from, it wouldn't have been nothing that the serpent could have said, because she would have identified which tree. There, likewise, when it comes to saying, I'm not under law, you need to identify which law. I'm not under the law of sin. I'm under grace. God's law. I'm under grace. Thanks to King Jesus, who fulfilled God's law. I am under grace. So, yeah. Anyway, this part here, we're looking at these taxes that was paid in Ezra. We're looking at the fact we found out like exactly how much of that money was being given every year. That was their expense budget. $1.17 billion. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot. $1.17 billion every year. And these monies came from the government. It came from the taxes that was exacted by the government. Ezra chapter 7 verse 17 and 18, they were told to make sure they were careful with this. Like, spend it wisely. Don't screw it around. Make sure you present it. Whatever needs to be presented to God, present it. Look, I like how I said it here in verse 19. Also, the articles that are given to you for the service of the house of your God, everything that's been given to you for the service of the house of your God, deliver it in full. In full. Nothing missing. Nothing missing, in full, before the God of Jerusalem. Okay, so going back to Nehemiah chapter 11 verse 23, after seeing how the church was government funded. The church is government funded today too, isn't it? The 501c3, no taxes. Nehemiah chapter 11 verse 23, where it said, it was the king's command concerning them that a certain portion be given for the singers. That certain portion referenced a decree that was set in place by King David long time ago. And that decree was found in 1 Chronicles chapter 23 verse 25 through 32, where the Levites, they were given new assignments. And they were given new assignments because of the fact that they would no longer have to carry the carry the Ark of the Covenant around from place to place. At first, they were like breaking down, setting up temples setting up tents and breaking down tents, and they had to do all that traveling. But now there was a set place in Jerusalem, and because of that, there was a set place. Let's see. I don't like the word that I'm choosing to use. How did David say it here? So this is 1 Chronicles 23, starting at verse 25. For David said, "For the Lord God of Israel has given rest to his people, that they may dwell in Jerusalem forever. And also to the Levites, they should no longer carry the tabernacle or any of the articles for its service. For by the last words of David, the Levites were numbered from 20 years old and above, because their duty was to help the sons of Aaron in the service of the house of the Lord, in the courts and in the chambers, in the purifying of all holy things, and the work of the service of the Lord, the service of the house of God, both with the showbread and the fine flour for grain offering, and for grain offering, with the unleavened cakes and what is baked in the pan, with what is mixed, and with all kinds of measures and sizes, to stand every morning to thank and praise the Lord, and likewise at evening, and at every presentation of a burnt offering to the Lord, on the Sabbath, on the new moons, on the set feasts, by number according to the ordinance governing them, regularly before the Lord, that they should attend to the needs of the tabernacle of meeting, the needs of the holy place, and the needs of the sons of Aaron, their brethren, in the work of the house of the Lord. The note says, there was no longer any reason for the tabernacle to be carried. Those Levites who had this as their main duty would receive new assignments. The matter of moving the ark would not come up again until hundreds of years later. It says, David also instituted regular temple music. The musicians must perform on a daily basis, as well as at the major sacrifices and on special occasions. So it was a set place now where they would worship, and they no longer had to move things all over. But not only was the Levites' duties changed, but also singers were set in place from the division of the leaders, from the children of Asaph. I think it was just from Asaph. But anyway, so Nehemiah chapter 11 verse 23 again, a certain portion of that $1.17 billion, a certain portion was to be set aside for the needs of the musicians and the singers. Why? Because they had to be on their posts every single day. So this is where the expectation of musicians to get paid comes from, y'all. I don't know that you knew that, but you see that in Nehemiah. It was set up, it was set in place by King David, and then reset in place by Artaxerxes, King Darius, King Artaxerxes, when they sent all this money back for them to put everything back in place as how it was. But note also that the singers, not only did the musicians get paid, the singers got paid too. So let's go back to Nehemiah chapter 11. It ends with, Nehemiah chapter 11 ends with listing the areas where those who returned from exile lived, the ones who didn't live in Jerusalem. And that was what I showed you earlier when I showed you the map in this Moody Atlas. I'll show it to you again. I'll show it to you again. Okay, so here's the map. And I highlighted. So here's Jerusalem right there. And then they were living in these different areas. So the areas that are highlighted in yellow, including those down here, the areas that are highlighted in yellow are where the Levites and the priests live, who did not live in Jerusalem, who were from the tribe of Judah. And then you had those who lived in the territory of Benjamin, and that's highlighted here in the pink. So and you read about these different ones in Nehemiah chapter 11 verses 25 through verse 36. So one of the things I also saw in looking at all of this is how detailed, like when I tell you, that's why I was skipping over these names, y'all. It was a bunch of names, and I'm like, oh, like some of the names I could pronounce, and some I was like, ew. I don't care how much I've been studying Hebrew, it's not gonna help me with some of these names. So yeah, they were very detailed. And in chapter 12, not only do you see this list continue, but the list also included the singers who took the lead in giving thanks and praise. So back in Nehemiah chapter 12, let's now read through. I've already read 27 through 43. So let's pick up at verse 44. I want to read over that part again. Nehemiah 12, 40. Don't want to do that. Yeah, 44 through 47. So it says, at the same time, again, we're talking about those who, let's see, they were dedicating the wall. And I showed you the picture of how some went one way and some went the other way, and they met up at the temple. And yeah, so at the same time, some were appointed over the rooms of the storehouse for the offerings, the first fruits and the tithes, to gather into them from the fields of the cities, the portions specified by the law for the priests and the Levites. So as all these people from all these different areas are bringing in their tithes and their offerings, there were certain rooms that was set up to hold this stuff. You know, your rooms for your grain, the rooms for the wines, the rooms for the oils. You know, they kept track of everything, and they had to, like, it was a lot of them, right? And so it said here, Judah rejoiced over the priests and the Levites who ministered. That was another thing too. They wanted to do it. Like, it came from their heart. You know, it was a blessing to them, a whole blessing to have these Levites who were operating how they were supposed to operate, and these singers constantly singing. Like it says here, Judah rejoiced over the priests and the Levites who ministered. Like, this was a joy for them to bring in these offerings willingly, as well as the tithes. Again, I'm gonna say it, y'all, the 1.17 billion. That's a lot. That's a lot. So it says here, both the singers and the gatekeepers kept the charge of their God and the charge of the purification. That was important so that they could minister. Oh, let me show you why that was important. Let me go all the way back. And this too, like, when I tell you this be blessing me, it be blessing me because of the fact that what I'm seeing is I'm seeing my weekday studies that has nothing to do with my Sabbath studies. I am seeing the merge of my weekday studies and my Sabbath studies. See this part here where it talked about the singers, even the singers. Now the priests and the Levites, they knew that they had to be purified. They knew that they had to keep this. They knew that this was important. But now you're seeing the singers doing the same thing. Like, listen, this thing was important. You're not ministering for the people. You're serving God. You're ministering to God. And this is a constant praise and worship that the people are able to enjoy. But you're doing this and you're lifting up these praises to God. And so this is what I was reminded of from my Sabbath studies. So the week before, now yesterday, my Sabbath studies, yesterday and Saturday, had me in Exodus chapter 24. And in Exodus chapter 24, where is it where they were told, let's see, sprinkle the words, 24, 23. I'm sorry, now I'm skimming through this with my eyeballs real quick, because they were told that they had to clean themselves. So I'm trying to see where it is that I said that, because that I saw that, because they could not come up. That would be in, would it be in 23? No, let me go on back over to 19, because I know I seen it there in 19. So in 19, the Lord tells Moses to tell the people, he said, consecrate them today and tomorrow, let them wash their clothes and be ready for the third day. Why? Because they were about to interact with the Lord. So they had to clean themselves. They had to separate themselves from the other nations who had also come out of Egypt with them. And then they had to sanctify themselves. It says, verse 14, so Moses went down from the mountain to the people and sanctified the people, and they washed their clothes. And he said to them, be ready for the third day. Do not come near your wives. That was included. No sex. That was included. So then you have again where the Lord says to Moses, verse 21, it says, the Lord said to Moses, go down and warn the people lest they break through to gaze at the Lord and many of them perish. Also, so now when he talked about the people, he's talking about everybody, but he says also let the priests who come near the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them. That part. Today, people, I'm going to pick on the choir, y'all. I'm going to pick on the choir. People come to their rehearsals, the choir rehearsals, and sometimes you can smell the alcohol on their breath. Sometimes they come dirty. You know, hard day's work, right? Coming straight from work. Sometimes you can smell the smoke on them. And the smoke. The smoke. And the smoke on them. And they come in a choir rehearsal like this. God told this is Exodus 19. He said to Moses, he said, tell the people, don't even come up to the mountain unless I break out. But also, let the priests know, this is verse 22. Let the priests who come near to the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them. Consecrating, you're setting yourself apart. You're cleansed. You're cleaning yourself, cleansing for this, because you're coming before the Lord. I think that some people don't realize that even when you in rehearsal, you coming before the Lord. Where you have your rehearsals at, but at the house of God, quote unquote, the house of God, or what you're claiming to be the house of God. And so to come into the house of God any type of way, he said, let God break out before you. But here's the other thing. You might say, well, he said that to the priests. But here's what you don't understand. All of those who are serving in the house of God, God had told them that they were to be a nation of priests. A nation of priests. Some of the stuff that I read over also, I think it would have been in this chapter 12, or would it been in chapter 11? I'm thinking it would have been in chapter 12, where it spoke of them prophesying, well, maybe it was in Chronicles, where it spoke of them prophesying with the instruments. Let me go see if I can see this. I'm probably ahead of myself as usual. I tend to do that sometimes. I don't mean to get ahead of myself. Let's see. I am looking at I'm in First Chronicles to see if I see it here where it spoke of, okay, so I think I found it in chapter 25 of First Chronicles. It says here, now it lists different ones because they were broken down, those who served of the sons of Asaph, right? And it was 24 different, what were they called? Lots, I guess. Nope. They switched out. I'm just gonna put it like that because I don't know the exact word that they used, but they switched out. And so here it is naming them of the son. It says, I'm just gonna skip through it. 25, First Chronicles chapter 25, verse 1. Moreover, David and the captain of the army separated for the service some of the sons of Asaph, of Heman, and of Jeduthun. So these are three different ones who were separated for the service. It says, who should prophesy with harps, stringed instruments, and cymbals. Prophesying isn't just for the priests. They were prophesying with the music instruments. They were prophesying with the singing. It says here, of the sons of Asaph, and then it lists them, the sons of Jeduthun. It lists, and then it says we got the sons of Jeduthun. Oh, wait a minute. Of the sons of Asaph, who prophesied according to the order of the king. Of Jeduthun, the sons of Jeduthun, who prophesied with a harp to give thanks and praise to the Lord. It says, of Heman, it says, all these were the sons of Heman, the king's seers, in the words of God, to exalt his horn. And then it says, all these were under the direction of the Lord. All these were under the direction of their father for the music in the house of the Lord, with cymbals, string instruments, harps, and for the service of the house of God. I'm like literally skipping through. I had highlighted, as you see, some of these key points. It says here, so the number of them with their brethren who were instructed in the songs of the Lord, all who were skillful, was 288. And it says, and they cast lots for their duty, the small as well as the great, the teacher with the student. And then it spoke of these 24 lots. So I figured like they each served an hour, but this is every single day. And this was just the musicians, y'all. This was just the musicians. So they purified themselves too. And that's what you see here in Nehemiah chapter 12, verse number 30. It says, then the priests and the Levites, then the priests and the Levites purified themselves and purified the people, the gates and the wall. And then you go on down and you see this with the singers. And it says here, and it says, and the same were, and at the same time, some were appointed. And this is again Nehemiah chapter 12, verse 44. We read it, but I'm going to read it again. And at the same time, some were appointed over the rooms of the storehouse for the offerings, the first fruits, the tithes, to gather into them from the fields of the cities the portions specified by the law for the priests and the Levites. For Judah rejoiced over the priests and the Levites who ministered. Both the singers and the gatekeepers kept the charge of their God and the charge of the purification, according to the command of David and Solomon his son. For in the days of David and Asaph of old, there were chiefs of singers, songs of praise and thanksgiving to God. In the days of Zerubbabel and in the days of Nehemiah, all Israel gave portions for the singers and the gatekeepers, a portion for each day. They also consecrated holy things for the Levites, and the Levites consecrated them from the children of Aaron. That's the purpose of the tithes and the offerings, you guys. It enabled those who worked in the temple of God, whose assignment was to care for and serve and minister within the temple of God. It enabled them to do their job and not have to worry, what am I going to eat today? I don't have clothes to wear. I have outgrown my clothes, or the clothes are either too small or they're either too big. What am I going to feed my family? They didn't have to worry about none of that. They had to worry about none of that because it was all taken care of. That was the purpose of the tithes and the offerings. Everything that they needed. That was, listen, from the very beginning. This didn't just have to do with the temple. It had to do from the very beginning with the Levites serving God. The tithes and the offerings that was brought in as instructed by the Lord our God was to take care of them so that they can focus on the ministry, so that they could focus on what it was that they had to do in serving not just God but the people, so that they can teach you. Listen, you can either get taught by someone who has that opportunity and that time to really sit and dig, and you're getting taught, like the word is getting broken down to you. Or you could get a happy meal by somebody who is divided in their attention. So because they're divided, I'm just going to take this little portion. I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to season it up real good, make it sound real good, make it sound like taste real good to your palate, like I say, season it up real good. Gift the gab, make sure that you might laugh a little, that I'm reaching you, you might get it, it's funny. I'm holding your attention and then I'm going to let you go. And so God says, you're robbing my temple. He said, the whole nation of you, you're robbing me. Let me go back to this before I get to that part about the robbing. I want to emphasize that the tithes was the religious obligation to support the Levites, the priests, and the poor. The Levites were not obligated land. So that's why they were supported by the tithes from the other tribes. The other tribes, all these tribes, they were given this land to work. But the Levites, their focus was to be on the ministry. So what was brought in took care of these Levites, enabling the Levites to stay focused. The tithes consisted of not money, but agricultural produce and livestock. When the Persians, after Jerusalem had got shut down, destroyed, and then allowed to be rebuilt, when the Persians exacted taxes from these different places, those taxes did not replace the tithes. Also, the temple workers were exempt from paying any taxes. One of the things I learned, because I started looking at these tithes real close, from what was done back in the day, and I learned that there was 3 types. There was your Levitical tithe or tax, which was to take care of the Levites and the priests. There was your festival tithes, which had to do with annual feasts, things that was brought in for these celebrations. And there was the poor tithe, or your special profit sharing tithe, which supported the needy. One of the things that I found is that they had some names. Sometimes, people would change the names, make it sound official, like, again, your special profit sharing tax. Then they had what was called a temple tax and, land Sabbath tax. The temple tax, the land Sabbath tax, I'm not sure exactly what I didn't dig. I'm just going to say I didn't dig. I didn't dig. The temple tax, from my understanding, was to take care of the temple, any of the needs of the temple. But the land Sabbath tax, again, I'm thinking that might have been the festival tithes. Not sure. Today, The tithes go to pay the musicians and the priests. Kind of remind me of the Levitical tax, which supported the Levites and the priests. The tithes today goes to pay for the upkeep of the building, your grounds upkeep, your utilities, anything that is needed as it pertains to the building. Again, it kind of reminds me of the Levitical tax, but then would it also be the festival tax? I would call it the temple tax. I would call that the temple tax. Then you have your funds that goes towards the fellowship meals that they like to do amongst their members, or they'll do what's called a friends and family day, where they'll bring in people, that's not associated, that might be friends, come and fellowship or however. And I think that's your poor, needy money, but it's being used within. Anyway, again, it mirrors the things that are being done today, mirrors what was done in biblical times in the Old Testament. But people would also tell you at the same token, we don't do what they did in the Old Testament, but some of what they did you're doing. So anyway, the taxes in the Bible times, again, was not paid with money. In Bible times, the taxes was paid in flour, meal, cattle, sheep, your fowl, your chickens. I'm saying your chickens, your birds, and your chickens, the fowl. I can't. That's one of the words I'm struggling saying. And other provisions. Heavy taxation. There's like some people that get greedy. For example, under Herodotus, I think I'm saying his name right. Under him, he practically doubled the taxes that Artaxerxes and Darius imposed. He went from 7,746 a year to like 14,500, somewhere up in there. 14,500. That's a lot. And then you have, one of the reasons why Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, split to begin with was because of the greed, because of the high taxes that was being charged, bringing in more, the excess. Again, greed. And because Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, would not lower the taxes, the people was like, you know what, I'm not serving you deuces back. You serve yourself. And so Judah was left with the tribe of Benjamin, and the other 10 tribes went on about their business. It's like, no, we ain't going for that. So now we're at this chapter 13 in Nehemiah, having gone over all this about the taxes. Going over to Nehemiah chapter 13, it is verses 10 through 13, 10 through 14 that we'll be looking at. And I needed to go over all of this that happened prior to what we're looking at here in chapter 13, which is the reference that Malachi sent me to. And I needed to go over that because you needed to see what happened. So here, do I want to read it? I don't know that I want to read it, but here in Malachi chapter 13, first of all, the priest Eliashib, who had authority over the storerooms. Remember, each of these Levites, each of these priests, they had authority, or they had certain job assignments that they had to do in the temple. So this particular priest, Eliashib, he was over the storehouses. And one of the storehouses, one of the rooms where they were supposed to store the taxes and, the offerings and stuff that was brought in, it was empty. And so he loaned it out. Do you want to say loan? You know how you have a room and you let somebody else use this room, they might pay you a little bit to use this room or however. He had an alliance with Tobiah, who was a Ammonite. And in his alliance with Tobiah, he allowed Tobiah to use this room, this storeroom that was at the temple. And he wasn't supposed to do that. And so Nehemiah, who had been gone for a while, when he came back, what he found when he came back was number one, he found that the singers and the musicians and the gatekeepers, none of them was in place. None of them. Where was the music? Where's the music? Like, where's the musician? Where the singers? None of them was in place. Why? Because they left to go back to their homes in these other cities surrounding Jerusalem. They left to go back because the people stopped bringing in their offerings and the taxes, the tithes, like it wasn't being distributed to them, so they needed to pay. They would know. Let me say that correct. The offerings was not being brought in. The tithes would have been coming in, which would have been the meats, right? But the offerings was not coming in. And because the offerings was not coming in, the people they didn't have the bread, the wine, the oil, they weren't being given this stuff. And so they had to go, the fruits, they had to go and provide for their families. They left. And one of the other things that Nehemiah found was the storeroom that was set apart to hold the offerings that was being brought in so that it could be distributed as needed. How come the storeroom is empty? And why is Tobiah an Ammonite and this other junk that he had? Why is this stuff in the store? This is not, in other words, there were rooms in the temple that was not being used for what it was designated for. And so all of that had to be cleaned out. This is what it says. Verse 8, chapter 13, Nehemiah. And it grieved me bitterly. Let me go back up verse 5, verse 4. Let me go to verse 4. I'm going to start with verse 4. Now, before this, it says, hold on. Oh, yeah. Okay. Now, before this, Eliashib the priest, having authority over the storerooms at the house of our God, was allied with Tobiah, who was an Ammonite. It says, and he had prepared for him a large room where previously they had stored the grain offerings, frankincense, the articles and tithes of grain and new wine and oil, which were commanded to be given to the Levites and singers and gatekeepers and the offerings for the priests. But during all this, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, the king of Babylon, I had returned to the king. Then after certain days, I obtained leave from the king and came to Jerusalem and discovered the evil that Eliashib had done for Tobiah in preparing a room for him in the courts of the house of God, and it grieved me bitterly. You have rooms in a house that you have designated, that you're saying today, you're saying, okay, this is the house of God, this is the church. But you got some rooms that are designated for something else. Or, just keep going. Just keep going. Let me keep going. Let me not touch it. It says, and I came to Jerusalem and discovered the evil that Eliashib had done for Tobiah in preparing a room for him in the courts of the house of God, and it grieved me bitterly. Therefore, I threw out all the household goods of Tobiah out of the room. Then I commanded them to cleanse the room, and I brought back into them the articles of the house of God with the grain offering and the frankincense. I also realized that the portions of the Levites had not been given them. For each of the Levites and the singers who did the work had gone back to his field. So I contended with the rulers, not with them, but with the rulers. Why is the house of God forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place. Then all Judah brought the tithe of the grain and the new wine and the oil to the storehouse. So all of those who had to leave their positions to take outside jobs, all of those who had to leave their positions in the presence of the Lord, which is where they were supposed to be daily, to take outside jobs. Because why? Because the people were no longer bringing in offerings and the tithes. It says, then all Judah brought the tithe of the grain and the new wine and the oil to the storehouse. And I appointed as treasurers over the storehouse Shelemiah, the priest, so a new priest, Eliashib, you're fired. You're fired. And a new priest is appointed, Shelemiah, the priest, Zadok the scribe, and the Levites, and of the Levites, it says Pedaiah, and next to them was Hanan, the son of Zakur, the son of Mattaniah, for they were considered faithful, and their task was to distribute to their brethren. And then Nehemiah prayed. He said, remember me, oh my God, concerning this, and do not wipe out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God and for its services. So, and then there was some other things that Nehemiah saw, which I'm not going to go into because it has nothing to do with the tithe and the purpose of the tithe back then. So that got me to thinking about today. And what I started thinking about was this. King Jesus, when he died a long time ago, and the curtain of the temple was rent in two, that temple had not been rebuilt. So this temple that we're looking at that they rebuilt, this was the second temple. The first temple was the temple that Solomon built. You know, David and Solomon there. So it was the temple that Solomon built. That was the first temple. Babylon destroyed it. So here we're looking at the rebuild. This is what we were looking at, the rebuild. So we're looking at the second temple. Now, the second temple was in operation at the time that Jesus came. And when Jesus died, that curtain that separated the holy from the most holy was rent in two from the top to the bottom. Rent in two. When that happened, later on, right behind that, because you know that wasn't fixed, but right behind that, Rome came, like some 30-something years later, and destroyed, completely leveled, destroyed Jerusalem again. The second time, again. When they did that, when Rome did that, that temple has not been rebuilt to this day. So this year, when you saw all that, if you saw it in the news on YouTube, when you saw all that about the rebuilding of the third temple, and you hear all this talking about the rebuilding of the third temple, that brings us from this that we're looking at in God's word to where we are today. Before Jesus died, and you know that happened with the curtain, Jesus had a comment that he had made to the people. He said to them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will rebuild it again. But he was referring to his body, and he called it the temple. The Apostle Paul later, talking to the Corinthians and a few others, said or confirmed that our bodies is the temple of the Holy Spirit. So while they're out there trying to build another temple, and while you have all these brick and mortar buildings around here that people are calling the temple, you know, the sanctuary and all this stuff, King Jesus said, he was talking about the body. He said, if you destroy it, 3 days later I rebuild it. He was talking about his body. And following in King Jesus' footsteps, the Apostle Paul taught us that our bodies is the temple of the Holy Spirit. He wants to dwell with us. That's point one. Point two, taxes. That's the second thing I started thinking about after reading over all this. Twice King Jesus in the book of Matthew. I'm just looking at Matthew. Now when I come back to this again tomorrow, when I look at this again tomorrow, a little deeper tomorrow, I'll probably look at Mark and Luke for this other, because, it was discussed in Mark and Luke too. But twice Jesus talked about the paying the taxes. The first one is Matthew chapter 17, verse 24 through 27. He was talking about the temple tax, right? And with the temple tax, somebody came up to Peter, I guess, and it was like he was like to Peter, your master don't pay taxes? Y'all don't pay taxes? And Peter was like, yeah, we do. And Jesus like Jesus asked Peter, he say, who does let me go look at how he said it. So it's Matthew, because I don't want to misquote on this. I got my Bible right here. Matthew chapter 17, verse 24. He says to Peter, what do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth take customs or taxes? From their sons or from strangers? And so Peter said, from strangers. So he said, then the sons is free. In other words, he was saying that we don't have to pay taxes. We're free. Talking about these temple taxes. The temple taxes. The temple taxes. He said, but, so as to not offend them, because, everybody doesn't understand this freedom. So as to not offend them, he said, go get the first fish you see. Inside its mouth is going to be enough taxes for both me and you. In other words, it was a didrachma. A drachma is worth it's like 2 drachmas. I think, okay, so the temple tax was 2 drachmas. A didrachma is worth 4. So that would have been the tax for 2 people. That would have been the taxes for 2 people. I couldn't help but do that. So that was the first one. That was the first one. The second one, where he was talking about taxes, somebody came, they was trying to trip him up, right? And so they was like, trying to condemn him from not paying taxes, and so what he told them was, he said, whose image, this part here, he said, whose image is on the coin? I guess he had them pull whatever coin they pulled out. He had to pull it out. And they said Caesar's image, and the coins back then, it would have had either Caesar's image on it, or it would have had the image of the god that they serve, goddess or god that they serve, or whatever. What it was said about it is that these coins were loaded with propaganda, with images. So ultimately, what King Jesus was saying when he said to pay back Caesar's things to Caesar, but God's things to God, he was saying that these coins belong to the person whose image is on it. Give it back to them. He said, but likewise, because when he said pay back Caesar's things to Caesar, but then he turned around and said, but God's things to God. Likewise, in that we are in the image, we were created in the image of God. Therefore, all that we are and all that we have belongs to God. Give it back to him. Pay back Caesar's things to Caesar, but God's things, all this in ourselves to God. He was teaching us about the type of mentality we should have in reference to all the things that we have. None of this is ours. Like, we're claiming stuff and we're trying to gather up a whole lot, and we're feeling some type of way as we have a whole lot, but none of this is ours. It belongs to God. And so our relationship towards, he's helping us with our relationship, I guess I'm trying to say, with everything that we have. How do we look at it? How do we look at it? What is your relationship with money? What is your relationship towards money, towards things, period? So what I wrote in my note is this. When God first instituted giving among his people, you actually see it in Exodus chapter 35, verse 1. Remember, and that kind of excited me too, that part that I'm sharing with you, because my Sabbath study was in Exodus chapter 34. So y'all know I saw my eyeballs went over and I saw, did I say 35? I should have said 25. I should have wrote 25. I didn't mean 35. I meant 25. Exodus chapter 25, verse 1. This is where giving, God first gives his command about giving. And like I said, it excited me because, number one, he talked about our heart condition. Number two, he gave the he gave in detail. He told me what the offering was, because remember in Malachi it says you're robbing me of tithes and offerings, right? So check this out. Verse 20, chapter 25, I'm going to read verse 1 through 8. It says, Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel that they bring me an offering. From everyone who gives it willingly with his heart, you should take my offering. He's telling Moses who to take it from those who are giving it willingly with his heart. If a person is giving but they not giving it willingly, don't take it. Don't take it. Keep your stuff. You can keep it. Don't take it. So it has to be done willfully, willingly from the heart. And this is the offering which you should take from them. So now he's telling us what the offering is. Gold, silver, bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet thread, fine linen and goat's hair, ram skins dyed red, badger skins, and acacia wood, oil for the light, and spices for the anointing oil, and for the sweet incense, onyx stones, and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. I need to read that again. Like I kind of threw myself off with the incense part. So, gold, silver, and bronze. That. Blue, purple, and scarlet thread, fine linen, and goat's hair. That part. Ram skins dyed red, badger skins, and acacia wood. That part. Oil for the light, and spices for the anointing oil and for the sweet incense. That part. Onyx stones and stones to be set in the ephod and the breastplate. So those were the different things that was to be giving as offerings. It says, and let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show you, that is the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it. So I read to verse 9. So here's the deal. Here's the deal. Since the temple has changed, since the temple has changed, the offerings have changed, and the tithe has changed. How so? All right, so look. King Jesus said, or referred to his body as the temple. The Apostle Paul told us that our bodies was the temple of the Holy Spirit. God says that he wants to dwell with us. He said, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. The sanctuary is the temple, right? And so is our body, right? Now, what do gold and silver, what do I need gold, silver, and bronze for my body for? Or blue, purple, and scarlet thread for my body? What do I need that for? What would I use that for my body? Fine linen, goat's hair, ram skins dyed red, badger skins, acacia wood, oil for light, and spices for anointing oil, and sweet incense. Well, you like to smell good, of course, right? Onyx stones to be set in the ephod, in the bread. Like, what would I need these things for if my body is the temple? So, the offering, right? That this was the offering. That's what God said here, that this was the offering. And literally says in verse 3, and this is the offering which you should take from them, right? So over here in Malachi chapter 3 verse 8, after he told them, he says, you're robbing me, you've robbed me in tithes and offerings. Then he says, you are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation. You're cursed with a curse because you're robbing me. But then in verse 10, he says, bring all the tithes into the storehouse. He didn't say the offerings. He said the tithes. So if the offerings has changed, if the storehouse has changed, and it's not because it's, if the storehouse, if the temple has changed, excuse me, if the temple has changed, because it's not, but it's, and the temple has storehouses, so I need to know what these storehouses are. Then what is the tithe and what is the offering that is to be brought into the storehouse? What is the offering? What is the tithe? We're going to go into that. I'm going to dig deeper into that. I feel like looking at what King Jesus said about the taxes, especially when he said that give back Caesar's things to Caesar, but God's things to God. I feel like there's clue to what this tithe is. The tithe. I feel like I'm going to dig deeper into that. There are some references here that I'm going to look at also in reference to bringing all the tithes into the storehouse. There's references for both the tithe and for the storehouse. So we're going to look a little deeper in that, and we're going to share from that, but we're not going to do that right now. I'm going to end this right here, right now. And I thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you understood. It was a lot, of course, to take in, but of course we had to look back at the original to even understand. We had to look back at what they were doing in the second temple, the temple that was just, because there is no third temple. Our bodies, we are the third temple. We had to look back at what they were doing. Look back at even for like the singers, and how all that went down, the offerings that was being brought in, the immense wealth that was being brought in, and what was happening with it. I think that's an issue that a lot of people have today as far as the offerings that are being given or not being given today. Like, where's all of this going, and what's supposed to be done with it? Well, if you want to understand what was supposed to have been done with those tithes back in the day, now what they're doing with these tithes today, I don't know, because all of them, everybody is working these other jobs. The focus is not on serving the Lord, not on God. It's a split focus. They have to work these jobs because people are not tithing, and they're not bringing, but you're bringing in money too, and today, as opposed to what it originally was supposed to have been, which was the grains from the land, but the people are not even working the lands like they were supposed to, and how it was done back in the day. So yeah, everything is just so out of order. Everything is so out of order based on how it was originally set up to be in God's word. It's so out of order. So, but I think you were able to see the comparisons too. I think you were able to see a lot of things that are being done today and how they were being done back then. I think, like, I found that very interesting. So anyway, let me let y'all go. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Bye.